The smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon usually filled my small kitchen with the warm embrace of home. But this Thanksgiving, it clung to the air like a shroud. I watched as little Timmy Jenkins, bright-eyed and eager, reached for another slice of my pecan pie. His mother, Sarah, smiling reassuringly beside him. My heart swelled, the way it always did when children enjoyed my baking, a tradition almost as old as my marriage itself. Then the laughter died. Timmy coughed, a soft, strangled sound, his cheeks flushing an alarming crimson. Sarah's smile vanished, replaced by stark terror. "Timmy, what's wrong?" she cried, her voice cracking as the boy's breathing hitched, desperate for air. I felt the collective gaze of my family, my friends, my community at the potluck shifting. First to Timmy, then to me, the pie still pristine on the counter between us. And as the sirens wailed in the distance, promising chaos, I knew, with a certainty colder than any winter morning, that this was no accident. Someone had done this, and they would pay. The aftermath of that Thanksgiving potluck was a blur of flashing lights, urgent paramedics, and the suffocating weight of suspicion. The whole community had seen it. Timmy Jenkins gasping for air after a bite of my famous pecan pie, the very pie that had won the church bake-off 3 years running. Reverend Albright, his face a mask of grief and confusion, had watched the scene unfold from the potluck line, a half-eaten roll forgotten in his hand. Everyone knew Timmy's severe nut allergy. It was the first thing parents were asked about on church field trip forms, mentioned at every Sunday school picnic. To even bring something containing nuts to an event where Timmy was present was an oversight of catastrophic proportions. To do what was being suggested, to purposely cause harm, felt like a blasphemy that stained not just me, but the entire benevolent spirit of the First Presbyterian Church of Willow Creek. My home, a modest bungalow I'd shared with Arthur for 40 happy years, suddenly felt like a tomb. The phone rang ceaselessly, but it wasn't the usual calls for recipes or sympathy. It was reporters, insistent and cold, or the muffled, shamed silences of former friends. Even the postman, normally cheerful, averted his eyes when he delivered the mail, which now included not just bills, but hastily printed pamphlets from activist groups advocating for greater food allergy awareness, sometimes with my face crew. Delay superimposed next to a warning symbol. The mail felt heavier than usual in my trembling hands, each letter a fresh accusation. The pecan pie, or what remained of it, was evidence now, taken by the police for testing. I pictured it in some sterile lab, its comforting sweetness turned into a vile instrument of crime. How had it come to this? Just a few months ago, my life had been simple, punctuated by morning coffee with Martha, Sunday services, and the occasional visit from my son, Michael, and his family. My greatest worry was whether the crust on my next apple pie would be flaky enough. Then Keisha arrived. My niece, Arthur's brother's daughter, a waif-like 20-something with bright, eager eyes, and a story about escaping a toxic roommate situation in the city. Her parents, my in-laws, were long gone, and Keisha had played the lost orphan card perfectly. "Aunt Brenda," she'd wept, clinging to me on my porch swing, "I have nowhere else to go. You're the only family I have left who understands me." I, a woman who had given 30 years of my life to raising my son, Michael, a woman whose every instinct was to nurture and protect, couldn't say no. Michael, always practical, had his doubts. "Mom, you barely know Keisha," he'd said over the phone, his voice laced with caution. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" But I was lonely, and Keisha was charming. She cleaned the house, helped in the garden, and listened raptly to my stories about Arthur, laughing at all the right places. She even expressed a profound interest in my baking, specifically my pecan pie. "It's legendary, Aunt Brenda," she'd coo, watching me mix the ingredients, notebook in hand. "I wish I could make something half as wonderful. Will you teach me all your secrets?" I smiled, a bittersweet memory. I loved sharing my traditions. My pecan pie recipe wasn't just flour and sugar, it was a legacy. Arthur's grandmother had perfected it, passed it down to my mother-in-law, who then shared it with me on my wedding day. It was our family's touchstone, appearing at every holiday, every celebration. I'd never shared the full, precise measurements with anyone outside the family, but Keisha's earnestness wore me down. I found myself explaining the intricate details of balancing dark corn syrup with maple, the specific way to toast the pecans, the secret splash of bourbon for depth. She wrote it all down, her brow furrowed in concentration. It made me feel valued, important, even useful again. But that was before Thanksgiving, before Timmy. Now my cherished home felt haunted, filled with the ghostly echo of Keisha's manipulative laughter. The community I had nurtured for decades now looked at me with open scorn, disgust, or worst of all, pity. I had dedicated my life to being a good neighbor, a caring church member, a loving mother, and a doting grandmother, even if my grandchildren were now teenagers, busy with their own lives. I had chaperoned school dances, organized charity drives, brought casseroles to countless grieving families. And in one terrible, horrifying instant, it had all been undone. My mind replayed the accusations, sharp and cutting. Sarah Jenkins, sobbing as she thanked the Lord Timmy was going to be all right. But her eyes, when they met mine across the emergency room waiting area, were hollow with blame. "How could you, Brenda?" she'd whispered, the words like tiny razors. And then there was Keisha. Oh, Keisha, my niece, my supposed guest, my kin. She had been the picture of shocked innocence, eyes wide with distress as the commotion erupted. "Aunt Brenda, how could this happen?" she'd wailed, drawing close, a comforting arm around my shoulders. "Who would do such a thing?" Later, at the police station, in front of Officer Miller, her voice had been a tremor of concern as she spoke about Aunt Brenda's declining memory and how I sometimes forgot little details. She even volunteered. Ed oh so innocently that she had baked the pie. She had baked the pie. The words echoed in my head, a terrifying chime. She had offered to bake it, saying she wanted to contribute, that she wanted to finally use the recipe I'd taught her. I had been touched, happy to pass the torch, to let her feel useful in my kitchen. "Of course, dear," I'd said. "Just make sure you double-check the ingredients, honey." The fact that she claimed ownership of the pie didn't just hurt my pride, it stripped me of any alibi. If she said she baked it, then she couldn't have placed the allergen. But it also sounded so innocent, almost like a selfless act of protection towards me, her frail, forgetful aunt. Officer Miller had taken notes, his gaze speculative. I could see the suspicion hardening in his eyes. He didn't just think I was negligent. He thought I was lying about who baked the pie to evade responsibility. The sheer audacity of her deceit, playing the caring relative while painting me as a senile, dangerous old woman, made my stomach clench with a bitter, acrid taste. I sat in my favorite rocking chair, a patchwork quilt Arthur's mother had made draped over my lap, its familiar weight doing nothing to ease the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I stared at the photo on the mantel, Michael and I, 20 years younger on his high school graduation day. He was a lanky, grinning boy, full of promise, and I was a proud, beaming mother. That photo represented a lifetime of sacrifice, of packed lunches, late-night talks, scraped knees, and quiet triumphs. Every decision I'd ever made was for my family, for their safety, their happiness. To have my character, my very identity as a protector, shattered like this by a calculated, cold-hearted lie, felt like a betrayal not just of me, but of every single moment of that love. My phone buzzed again. Another message, undoubtedly. I knew it wasn't from Martha, she preferred calling. I'd ignored most of the messages for the past week, but this time, a morbid curiosity pulled me. It was a forwarded chain message from the church's Women of Faith WhatsApp group, started by Sister Mary Bate, a woman who'd once gushed about my lemon bars. The message was a link to an online petition, "Justice for Timmy Jenkins, hold those responsible accountable." Below it, a short, pointed message from Sister Mary Bate herself. "We must ensure our children are safe in God's house." No excuses for such negligence, deliberate or otherwise. The subtext was clear. The implied negligence was mine. A few other members had added emoji reactions, a shocked face, a thumbs down, not a single word of support. I closed my eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the dust of self-pity on my cheek. Why hadn't I seen it? Keisha, always so sweet, so eager. "Aunt Brenda, the congregation is so lucky to have you. Your pie always makes everyone so happy," she'd burbled, watching me mix the filling. Her compliments had been so perfectly timed, so precisely what my lonely heart craved. She de-observed my routines, learned my habits, listened to my stories, soaking up details about the church, its members, and their children, especially Timmy, whose allergy had been mentioned offhand one afternoon when Keisha helped me raise some snacks for the Sunday school children. She hadn't just charmed me, she had researched me, built her scheme piece by painstaking piece, using my own life, my own reputation, against me. The thought made a cold knot form in my gut, hardening from despair into something sharper, more resilient. That evening, I was mechanically wiping down the kitchen counters, trying to restore some semblance of order to a life that had spiraled out of control. The once gleaming countertops now seemed dull, reflecting only my own hollow-eyed reflection. I reached for the fruit bowl, intending to polish it, when my hand brushed against something heavy behind it. My Amazon Echo. Arthur had bought it for me a few Christmases ago, convinced I needed futuristic convenience. I'd used it for a week or two to play classical music while baking, but mostly I just forgot it was there. And then Keisha, in her efficient cleaning spree a few days after she moved in, had unplugged it to wipe the counter beneath it, and I'd never bothered to plug it back in. It had sat there, a silent sentinel gathering dust. Curiosity, a fleeting ember in the vast darkness of my grief, stirred. What did those things do? Arthur had once mentioned it recorded things. Maybe it had saved some of the hymns I used to play, or my voice telling it to set a timer for my pies. I picked up the smooth, cylindrical device. It felt strangely inert, like a petrified stone. With a hesitant touch, I plugged it back in. A soft blue ring lit up, and a robotic female voice announced, "Hello, Brenda. System update required." I followed the on-screen prompts on my tablet, linking the Echo to its companion app, a process Arthur had set up years ago, but I'd forgotten. As the update downloaded, I browsed the app, an unfamiliar landscape of settings and features. Under Activity History, I saw a list of commands, mostly old. Alexa, play Chopin. Alexa, set timer for 30 minutes. Then, under Voice Recordings, a scrollable list, many of which had voice match unsuccessful, indicating a guest voice. My heart hammered, a sudden, frantic rhythm in my chest. I scrolled through, listening to snippets, a news brief, a weather report, a grocery list. Then, on the evening of the Thanksgiving potluck, a longer recording, marked with Keisha's assumed user profile. My hand trembled as I pressed play. Yeah, no, she totally fell for it. Every last detail, Keisha's voice, bright and entirely too cheerful, filled my kitchen. It was unmistakable, not the soft, demure tone she used with me, but sharp, triumphant. The whole thing. The nuts, the pie, Timmy's allergy, the works. He won't die, obviously. I checked the dosage, just enough for a spectacular show. Brenda will take the fall. She's too old, too trusting. The recipe's mine now, and so is her reputation, really. People will see me as the good one, the one who tried to help her poor forgetful aunt. She even let me bake the pie. How perfect is that? No one will ever suspect a thing. All that talk about being careful with the allergens? Classic misdirection. So simple, brilliant, really. A cold, hard laugh, devoid of humor, echoed in the quiet kitchen. She's practically handed me the keys to the kingdom. My delicious, famous pecan pie. The recording ended, plunging my world into an even deeper, more profound silence. But this wasn't the silence of despair. This was the deafening silence of revelation, of absolute clarity. Keisha. It was Keisha. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stripping away every layer of doubt, every trace of self-blame. My niece, this lost little bird I had welcomed into my home, had engineered this entire horrific spectacle. She had systematically, methodically, and with astonishing cruelty, destroyed my good name. And she had done it with a smile, a hug, and a whispered word of comfort. The betrayal was so complete, so monstrous, that it left no room for tears, only a fierce, cold certainty. I played the recording again, letting every venomous syllable sink in, no longer just a listener, but a forensic observer. I reread the messages from the church group, the accusations, the petitions. The scorn now seemed directed at Keisha, not me, a justice already bubbling beneath the surface of my rage. The voice progression the prompt asked for began its subtle shift. My trembling hands became steady. The fog of self-pity dissipated, replaced by a crystalline clarity. My heart, which had been broken into a million pieces, started to knit itself back together. Not perfectly, not without scars, but with a new, harder, unyielding strength. I saved the audio file to my tablet, then to my computer, and emailed it to myself for good measure. I then carefully reviewed the echo settings, making sure future recordings would be saved and stored. Keisha might have underestimated my technical prowess, but she certainly underestimated my will to survive. I would not just protect my family's legacy, I would protect my own. The next morning, I called Martha. Her hesitant hello spoke volumes about the unspoken awkwardness that had developed between us since Thanksgiving. Martha, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need your help. Not as a friend, but as someone who cares about truth. A pause then. Brenda, what are you talking about? Keisha, I stated, letting the name hang in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. I have proof, everything. I need to know a good lawyer, one who's discreet but ruthless. Martha's gasp was audible. Brenda, are you all right? What kind of proof? Digital, I replied, a cold smile forming on my lips. And it changes everything. I scheduled a meeting with Martha for coffee at our usual spot, the Daily Grind, but told her to expect to spend some time in the car afterward. When I got there, I could see the lines of worry etched around her eyes, her lips pressed thin. Brenda, she began immediately, I wanted to call you, but well, it's just been so awful and… I know, Martha, I interrupted gently. You don't need to explain, just listen. In the privacy of my parked car, I played the echo recording. Martha listened, her expression moving from confusion to shock, then to outrage. Her face, usually so composed, contorted with disbelief. Oh my God, Brenda, she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. That conniving little snake, I knew she was a bit too sweet. But this, she tried to paint me as senile, as careless, Martha, I said, my voice rising in cold anger. She took my legacy, my good name, and used it to try and destroy me. Martha, ever practical, recovered quickly. We need to get this to the police. No, first, a lawyer. A good one. My cousin's husband, Richard Davies, he's a defense attorney. Smart as a whip. He'll know what to do. Richard Davies was exactly as Martha described. Sharp-suited, bespectacled, with a quiet intensity that put me at ease. I played the recording for him in his office, his expression unreadable as Keisha's chilling voice filled the room. When it finished, he leaned back, stroking his chin. Mrs. Miller, he began, his voice calm, this is very damning evidence. A direct confession. Given the victim's age and the clear premeditation, this moves beyond mere negligence. This is a very serious matter. Attempted battery, certainly endangerment of a minor, perhaps even assault with a deadly weapon depending on how the prosecutor frames it. He paused, tapping his pen. Have you gone to the police? Not yet, I said. I wanted to understand my options first. I'm not just looking for justice, Mr. Davies. I want my name cleared. I want Keisha to face public humiliation, the kind that can't be washed away with a fake apology. The idea of Keisha's practiced remorse felt like bile in my throat. He nodded slowly. Understood. The public aspect is key, then. My advice would be to go to the police with this. But before that, we consider a strategic disclosure. You see, if we drop this on them suddenly, the community, the church, even the authorities will react in a way that gives Keisha less room to maneuver. We need to maximize the shock, minimize her ability to lie her way out of it. She clearly thrives on manipulating public perception. Let's strip her of that weapon. He continued, your niece has already attempted to control the narrative. The forgetful aunt story, this will blow that out of the water. Do you know of any instances of similar behavior from Keisha in the past? Any prior, unfortunate misunderstandings she might have mentioned? A flicker of memory. She did mention something when she first moved in, something about a mix-up with a recipe at a previous job, a small bakery where she'd worked. Said she'd been misunderstood when a proprietary ingredient went missing. She played it off as office politics. The words, heard now through the filter of Keisha's recorded confession, took on a sinister new meaning. Interesting, Mr. Davies murmured, making a note. That establishes a pattern, suggests a calculated nature. not a spur-of-the-moment decision. We'll look into that. He spent another hour discussing the legal implications, the potential charges, and the best way to approach law enforcement. He advised me not to engage Keisha directly, to keep the existence of the recording secret for now. Let her believe she's won, he said. The fall will be harder. He drafted a letter to the district attorney's office, outlining my statement and indicating I had compelling audio evidence. The first offensive move was subtle, designed to put a ripple of doubt into the water, to make Keisha just slightly uneasy. I still had access to the church's private Facebook group, where Keisha was now being lauded for her tireless devotion to Timmy Jenkins and his family, arranging meal deliveries and crowdfunding efforts for his medical bills, even though he was recovering well and largely covered by insurance. The pastor, Reverend Albright, even posted about her selfless spirit, subtly contrasting it with the recent tragedy. Keisha basked in the praise, responding with saccharine humility. "Just doing what Jesus would do," she posted. Instead of directly refuting anything, I simply posted a short message, carefully crafted with Mr. Davies. It read, "Brenda Miller, Willow Creek community member, November 30, 9:15 a.m. thinking of Timmy and his family. I pray that the truth of what happened that Thanksgiving Day comes to light so that true justice can be found for all. God works in mysterious ways, and some truths are often revealed when least expected." It was vague, seemingly innocent, yet carried a subtle undertone of warning. The kind that would resonate with people who knew me and remembered my steadfastness. It wasn't an accusation, not even a defense, but a statement of resolute faith in justice. It was a message of impending revelation. I deliberately kept my profile picture the old one, me smiling kindly, clutching a small award for Best Homemaker from a local fair decades ago. A stark contrast to the villainous image the media and rumors were painting. Keisha's response was almost instantaneous. She, who usually dominated the comments, posted a strangely terse message, devoid of her usual emoji fanfare. "Amen, Aunt Brenda. Prayer always helps." Her overly formal address and lack of usual gushing set off alarms. I knew she had seen it. The fish had taken the bait, just a nibble, but enough. Later that day, Martha called, bubbling with excitement. "Brenda, you wouldn't believe it. Mary Bate just called me, asking about your post. Said it sounded unusual for you, but then remembered you always were one for poetic justice. She's confused, Brenda. She's asking questions." This was exactly what Mr. Davies had predicted. Keisha's performance, flawless in its villainy, had been disrupted. The faint hum of suspicion, once solely focused on me, now had another wavelength to consider. The community network, still overwhelmingly swayed against me, had experienced its first, tiny tremor. Keisha was used to having total control of the narrative. My simple, truthful statement had begun to unravel it. Keisha, true to form, was about to miscalculate badly. My little Facebook post must have gnawed at her, planting a seed of unease in her carefully constructed fortress of lies. Within a few days, I saw a new post pop up on the Nextdoor app, a local neighborhood forum where gossip and complaints flourished alongside recommendations for plumbers. It was from Keisha. Keisha Hayes, Willow Creek resident, December 3, 4, 20 p.m. Dearest neighbors, I'm so worried about my Aunt Brenda. Since the terrible Thanksgiving incident, she hasn't been herself. She's been posting some rather cryptic messages on social media, and honestly, I'm concerned for her mental well-being. She sometimes gets confused, and I fear the stress is truly affecting her. I only want to protect her, but I'm worried she might say or do something that makes things worse. Please keep her in your prayers. It was a brilliant piece of emotional manipulation, designed to reframe my subtle warning as evidence of my fragile mental state. A preventative strike, painting me as erratic before I could reveal anything substantial. She was leveraging her public image as the caring niece and my supposed declining memory, amplifying it. And the worst part was, it worked at first. A flurry of comments followed, expressing sympathy for Keisha and concern for poor Brenda. Some suggested a doctor's visit, others hinted at early-onset dementia. "It's so sad," one neighbor wrote, "she used to be such a sharp woman." But then, a flicker. My dear friend Martha, no longer silent, broke through. Martha Reynolds, Willow Creek resident, December 3, 5:02 p.m. Keisha, while your concern for Brenda is touching, I've just had coffee with her, and she seems perfectly lucid and sharp to me. Perhaps there's more to these cryptic messages than you're assuming. Sometimes, what looks like confusion is actually courage. A stunned silence followed that post, visible in the lag of new comments. Martha's words, quiet but firm, cut through Keisha's sugary performance. People knew Martha. She wasn't one for drama. Her public defense of me was a significant turning point. It wasn't an accusation, but it planted a crucial seed of doubt, making people reconsider Keisha's narrative. Keisha must have been furious. She quickly replied to Martha, trying to regain control. Keisha Hayes, Willow Creek resident, December 3, 5:10 p.m. Martha, I appreciate your perspective, but you only see Aunt Brenda occasionally. I live with her. I see the struggles. It's a delicate situation. Let's not encourage false hope or add to her distress. It was a clumsy attempt, too dismissive of Martha's long friendship with me. Some neighbors, no longer simply accepting Keisha's words, began to notice. Delicate situation usually meant something hidden. I watched the comments thread, sensing the shift. Keisha was reacting, which meant she was feeling exposed. She was fighting, which meant she was scared. The courage Martha mentioned was now a palpable force. That evening, a flurry of police activity erupted near my house. It wasn't for me, but it involved Keisha. She'd gone to the house, frantic. She hadn't been back since the Thanksgiving incident, pretending to stay with friends because the tension was too much. But she wasn't looking for clothes or to offer solace. According to the police report I later heard about, she'd called them hysterical, claiming sentimental items were being stolen from my home by a shady character. She had seen entering my house, implying it was me, but too vaguely to Mac. A direct accusation. The officers arrived, found nothing, and quickly deduced Keisha was likely trying to gain access to something. It became clear later she was looking for the Amazon Echo. She probably just now remembered it existed, or what it could contain. Her panicked call to the police was a frantic, desperate attempt to either retrieve it or create a chaotic situation where she could pretend it was stolen from her or destroyed, preempting its use as evidence. She must have thought my Facebook post meant I knew. Her panic and her clumsy attempt to manufacture an alibi for the Echo's disappearance confirmed to Officer Miller, who was still involved in the ongoing investigation regarding Timmy, that Keisha had something to hide. Her increasingly erratic behavior, the overly dramatic posts, the transparent attempt to get inside my home was generating a new kind of evidence, her own miscalculations. Mr. Davies chuckled when he heard the story. She's weaving her own rope, Mrs. Miller, he'd said. Just let her twist. The next Sunday, the church was abuzz with a peculiar tension. Reverend Albright had announced a special healing service for Timmy Jenkins and his family, an event designed to bring the community together, but also, in its own way, to confront the lingering shadow of Thanksgiving. Keisha, ever present, was positioned strategically near Sarah Jenkins, offering quiet comfort, looking the picture of solicitous grief. I had arrived early with Martha, choosing a seat in the back pew, my heart a complex mix of dread and steel. I clutched a small, nondescript USB stick in my hand, containing the audio file. It felt impossibly light, yet it held the weight of my shattered reputation and my hope for redemption. The service began with hymns, a comforting balm for a community bruised by suspicion. Reverend Albright spoke eloquently about faith, forgiveness, and the enduring power of God's love. Then he invited Sarah Jenkins to the pulpit to offer a word of thanks and a prayer for her son's recovery. Sarah, brave and vulnerable, spoke movingly about Timmy's return to health, her voice choked with emotion. As she concluded, the Reverend's gaze swept over the congregation. And now, he announced, we have with us today a young woman who has truly embodied the Spirit of Christ in these difficult times. Keisha, would you join us up here to share a special prayer you've written for Timmy and the journey of healing for our community? Keisha, glowing under the spotlight, demurely rose from her pew. She glided to the pulpit, offering Sarah a warm hug, then turned to face the congregation. She adjusted the microphone, a picture of humble piety, her lips curved in a soft, sad smile. She began to speak, her voice a theatrical whisper. "Dear Lord, we stand before you today with heavy hearts, yet filled with hope for sweet Timmy's complete recovery. We pray for understanding, for healing, and for forgiveness in the wake of such a challenging time. We pray for all those affected, for the misguided and the misjudged, for clarity to shine where there is darkness." It was my cue. As she launched into her manipulative sermon of veiled self-pity and thinly disguised accusations against me, I rose from my seat in the back. Every eye in the church, drawn by some invisible magnetic force, followed my slow, deliberate walk down the aisle. I held my head high, my gaze fixed not on Keisha, but on Reverend Albright, who watched me with a bewildered expression. Martha, in the pew beside me, gave my hand a squeeze, a silent cheer of support. When I reached the steps of the pulpit, I didn't stop. I walked right up, past Sarah, whose eyes widened in confusion, and past Keisha, whose carefully composed smile faltered, replaced by a flash of terror as she recognized the determined glint in my eye. She stopped mid-sentence, her voice trailing off. "Reverend Albright," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence that had fallen over the sanctuary, steady and clear, carrying to every corner of the church. "With all due respect, I believe there is something far more pressing that needs to be brought to the light today. A truth not just for healing, but for justice." Keisha quickly stepped back from the microphone, trying to grab my arm, her eyes pleading. "Aunt Brenda, what are you doing? This isn't the place." "You're upset?" "Upset?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed in the hushed church. "Oh, my dear, I am far beyond upset." I reached past Keisha, who flinched, and unplugged the microphone from the pulpit stand. Then, from my pocket, I pulled out my tablet, its screen already showing the audio playback interface. I plugged the tablet directly into the church's sound system, its connection port exposed by the unplugged microphone. The congregation watched, mesmerized. A faint static buzzed from the speakers, signaling a live connection. "For months," I began, my voice amplified, now ringing with power, "I have carried a burden of suspicion, of shame, and of blame. My reputation, built over 60 years of loving service to this community, was shattered in an instant by a cruel, premeditated act. I was called negligent, careless, even senile. But the truth, as always, has a way of coming to light." I looked directly at Keisha, whose face had gone white as bone. "You see," I continued, "not all kitchen gadgets are as simple as they seem. Some are silent witnesses." I pressed play. Keisha's triumphant, chillingly clear voice filled the sanctuary. "Yeah, no, she totally fell for it. Every last detail, the whole thing. The nuts, the pie, Timmy's allergy, the works. He won't die, obviously. I checked the dosage, just enough for a spectacular show. Brenda will take the fall. She's too old, too trusting. The recipe's mine now, and so is her reputation, really. People will see me as the good one, the one who tried to help her poor forgetful aunt. She even let me bake the pie. How perfect is that? No one will ever suspect a thing. All that talk about being careful with the allergens, classic misdirection, so simple, brilliant, really. Followed by that cold, hard, unfeeling laugh. She's practically handed me the keys to the kingdom. My delicious, famous pecan pie. The recording, raw and undeniable, played for perhaps 30 seconds, but it stretched into an eternity. Gasps erupted across the congregation. A woman cried out. Sarah Jenkins, who had been standing frozen beside me, clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes fixed on Keisha in horrified disbelief. Reverend Albright's jaw had dropped, his face mirroring the shock of hundreds. Keisha let out a strangled shriek. "No, that's not me, it's fake, it's edited," she shrieked, desperately lunging for the tablet. But I anticipated her move, pulling it back. "Fake," I challenged, my voice now laced with iron. "That is your voice, Keisha. Your plan, your confession." At that moment, Officer Miller, who had been sitting inconspicuously in a back pew at Mr. Davies' subtle suggestion, stood up and began making his way forward. 2 other uniformed officers, positioned just outside the sanctuary, entered discreetly. "Keisha Hayes," Officer Miller's voice, though calm, cut through the growing din, "you are under arrest for attempted battery and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Keisha, realizing her meticulously crafted world had crumbled, began to openly weep, not with sorrow, but with rage and humiliation. Aunt Brenda, how could you do this to me? I'm your family. You betrayed your family, Keisha, I countered, my voice echoing, full of a quiet authority I hadn't known I possessed. You broke trust, you committed an evil act, and you tried to destroy an innocent person. Family protects family. You are no family of mine. As the officers escorted a sobbing, furious Keisha out of the church, her muffled protests and threats fading down the aisle, the sanctuary fell into an almost eerie silence. Faces were turned to me, some still etched with shock, others with dawning understanding, and a few with outright shame. Sarah Jenkins, pale but resolute, stepped forward and embraced me, tears streaming down her face. Brenda, she whispered, I am so sorry. I should never have doubted you. Her words, simple and heartfelt, were the first drops of rain after a long, devastating drought. The aftermath was a tornado of apologies and awkward reassessments. Reverend Albright, after collecting himself, delivered a powerful sermon on the deceptive nature of sin and the ultimate triumph of truth. He offered a public, heartfelt apology to me from the pulpit. We, as a community, failed you, Brenda, he said, his voice heavy with contrition. We allowed ourselves to be swayed by malice and deception, and we did not uphold our sacred duty to believe and protect one another. The rest of the service was a blur. Many came up to me afterward, tears in their eyes, offering mumbled apologies. Sister Mary Bate, red-faced and genuinely penitent, clutched my hand, her voice barely a whisper. Brenda, I don't know what to say. I've been so awful. Even some who hadn't spoken directly to me, their eyes now met mine, full of unspoken regret. Not everyone, of course. Some faces were still skeptical or simply too uncomfortable to acknowledge their error. But the shift in the community was palpable, a tectonic plate moving beneath the surface of Willow Creek's social fabric. The legal process unfolded slowly, but inexorably. With the audio recording as irrefutable evidence, Keisha's legal defense quickly crumbled. She was offered a plea deal: time in a correctional facility, probation, and mandatory psychological counseling, or face a full trial with the real possibility of a harsher sentence. She eventually took the plea, unable to stomach the idea of a public trial, replaying her confession over and over. News of her convictions spread like wildfire through Willow Creek, confirming every whispered suspicion. Her carefully constructed facade of virtue was completely demolished, replaced by a reputation as a malicious con artist. For me, the immediate relief was profound, but the emotional scars remained. My trust in people, once so expansive and giving, had shriveled to a cautious core. Rebuilding relationships was a painstaking process. Martha, bless her steadfast heart, was a constant presence, our coffee dates at the daily grind resuming their familiar rhythm, albeit with a new, deeper layer of understanding. Michael called, his voice laced with regret. Mom, I should have listened to my gut about Keisha, he admitted. I'm so sorry I didn't push harder to protect you. It was an apology that truly mattered, a balm to wounds that had festered in silence. I spent long afternoons in my garden, weeding, pruning, nurturing. The quiet physicality of it was a comfort. The rocking chair in the living room, once a symbol of my solitary despair, now felt like a place of peaceful reflection. I was no longer bitter, or only slightly. The experience had forged in me a new kind of strength, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I learned to discern genuine kindness from manipulative charm, to trust my own instincts over the clamor of public opinion. My life wasn't back to normal. It was something new, something fundamentally different. The church, after much soul-searching and a series of difficult community meetings, began to heal. Reverend Albright instituted new policies, including a clear protocol for addressing allegations within the community, ensuring due process and avoiding hasty judgments. He even asked me to join a new Community Integrity Council to help rebuild trust and guide the congregation. I accepted. My prize-winning pecan pie recipe, now reclaimed, remained in my family, a symbol of a legacy that had survived betrayal. I no longer shared it freely, but with newfound wisdom about who was truly worthy of its sweetness. The shadow of broken trust would always be a part of my story, a testament to the pain of betrayal. But it was no longer a shadow that consumed me. It was a memory, a reminder of the darkness I had faced, and the light I had found within myself to overcome it. My inner monologue, once a fragile whisper of doubt, was now a firm, steady voice of quiet power. I walked with a renewed purpose, my head held high, knowing that while some broken things can never be truly mended, they can often be remade into something stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more beautiful. The scent of cinnamon and roasting pecans still drifted through my kitchen sometimes, but now it smelled less of sorrow and more of survival. Do not let others dictate your truth or silence your voice. Find your own strength and tell your story.